Welcome to Shattered Ties, where trust is broken, loyalties are tested, and hidden betrayals come to light. Here, we uncover the darkest sides of family, friendship, and love, stories of deception, greed, revenge, and the quiet pursuit of justice. So sit back, listen closely, and step into a world where every shattered bond leaves a scar. They used her name to buy a house for another woman. They called it love, family, and a mistake she should forgive, but found the closing video, the forged signature, and the money trail her husband thought was buried. And at the baby shower, she pressed play. The envelope was pale blue, the expensive kind that made bad news look polite. It was waiting on my porch on a Friday afternoon, wedged under the brass planter Mason bought me after he missed our anniversary. At first, I thought it was another charity appeal or a refinancing offer. Then I saw the return address. County Escrow Services. My name was typed across the front in formal block letters. Harlan. Not and Mason Harlan, just. I opened it standing in the entryway, one hand still on the doorknob, groceries cutting red lines into my fingers. Inside was a tax adjustment notice for a property on Briar Hollow Lane. A house, 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, closing date 6 weeks earlier. Mortgage holder, Greenstone Federal. Responsible party, Harlan. For a few seconds, I simply stared at the page and waited for the world to correct itself. I did not own a house on Briar Hollow Lane. I had never even driven through that neighborhood. Mason and I lived in a narrow townhouse with a leaky kitchen skylight and a second bedroom we used for laundry because we had spent 2 years saving for something bigger. That was what Mason called it when he transferred little pieces of my paycheck into our joint savings. Something bigger. He said it like a promise. My mother used to say promises were only as clean as the person making them. She had been dead for 11 months then. The inheritance she left me was not huge by rich people's standards, but it was huge by grief standards. The last thing she had worked for, folded into bank statements and legal paperwork. She had told me, during one of her final lucid afternoons, "Don't let Mason turn this into a family pot. This is yours, not because I don't like him, because grief makes women generous when they should be careful." I had laughed because I thought she was being dramatic. I stopped laughing when I saw the escrow notice. Mason came home at 6:30 smelling like rain and expensive coffee. He kissed my cheek, set his laptop bag by the stairs, and began telling me about a client call before he noticed the paper on the kitchen island. His voice paused for less than half a second. That was how I knew. Not because he looked guilty. Guilty people often look innocent if they have rehearsed. It was the pause. The tiny mechanical skip in a man who had just seen a secret sitting under fluorescent kitchen light. "What's that?" he asked. I turned the notice toward him. "You tell me." His eyes moved over the page too quickly. Not reading, confirming. Then his face softened into concern. The expression he used whenever he wanted me to feel fragile instead of furious. He said, "Don't panic." I had not been panicking. Not until he told me not to. That was the thing about Mason. He never reacted first as a husband. He reacted as a man checking whether the lock still held. His eyes went to the account number, the property address, the barcode at the bottom, every practical detail except my face. I watched him calculate, and some final, loyal part of me waited for him to look horrified on my behalf. He never did. He only looked inconvenienced by discovery, which is a different kind of confession. I used to think suspicion was something ugly, something that meant love had failed. Now I know suspicion can be the last honest part of you still trying to survive. That envelope did not make me suspicious. It finally gave my suspicion paper. Mason said it had to be a mailing error. He said escrow companies made mistakes all the time. He said someone probably had a similar name. He said I was tired, and grief had been making me hypervigilant, a word he had learned from a podcast and started using whenever I asked questions he did not enjoy. I asked why the notice included my full legal name, my current address, and the last 4 digits of my social security number. He blinked once. "Identity theft, maybe. Then we call the bank." "Tomorrow," he said too quickly. "Let me handle it tomorrow. You don't need to carry one more thing tonight." That was Mason's gift, making control sound like protection. At 3 in the morning, while he slept beside me with one arm thrown over his face, I the Briar Hollow address into my phone. The house was 23 minutes away, showed a gray colonial with a white porch, black shutters, and a nursery visible through one upstairs window in the listing photos. The sale price made my throat close. $612,000. Our townhouse was worth half that if the skylight stopped leaking and the market got drunk. The next morning, Mason left early for a site visit. I watched his car disappear, then then drove to Briar Hollow Lane. The neighborhood looked like it had been designed by someone who believed money should whisper. Wide lawns, clean sidewalks, old trees, no trash cans visible from the street. The house sat at the bend of the road, freshly mulched, with a wreath on the door and 2 rocking chairs on the porch. A woman stepped out, holding a cardboard box of baby clothes. I knew her. Not well, not the way you know a friend. I knew her as a name, Mason said with professional impatience. Crane, a real estate consultant attached to one of his development accounts. She was younger than me by 6 or 7 years, all polished hair and soft sweaters, the kind of woman people called sweet because she smiled before she lied. She placed the box on the porch and rested one hand on her stomach. Pregnant! The air inside my car vanished. She turned toward the driveway when a black SUV pulled in behind me. Mason's SUV. He got out carrying coffee, flowers, and a small white bakery bag. Not site visit coffee, not client flowers, not a mistake. Walked down the porch steps, and Mason kissed her forehead with the tenderness of a man coming home. I sat in my car with the engine running, watching my husband enter a house bought in my name. A strange calm came over me. It was not peace. Peace is warm. This was cold and clear, like a window opening in winter. I took 3 pictures, one of the house, one of the address, one of Mason's car in the driveway. Then I drove home before rage could make me useful to him. On the drive home, I passed a playground full of children and had to pull over because my hands began shaking too hard to steer. It was not jealousy yet. Jealousy would have been easier. Jealousy is about wanting what someone else has. This was stranger. This was the realization that someone else had been living inside a future built from my name, my credit, and my dead mother's sacrifice, while I was still clipping coupons and telling myself Mason was tired from work. I took the long way home because the short way past our bank, our grocery store, our dry cleaner, every ordinary place where I had stood beside Mason believing we were building the same life. Ordinary streets can become cruel when memory starts correcting itself. My mother's inheritance account had always felt untouchable. After she died, I kept it at Harbor Crest Credit Union because that was where she had kept her savings since before I was born. Mason complained about that. Not loudly, never directly. He preferred erosion to impact. Wouldn't it make sense to consolidate? He would ask while folding laundry or pouring wine. We're married. It's weird to act like your mother's money lives outside our life. My mother's money. He never called it my inheritance, unless a lawyer or banker was present. That morning, after seeing him at Briar Hollow, I drove straight to Harbor Crest. I had not made an appointment. I must have looked terrible because the receptionist stopped smiling halfway through asking my name. The branch manager, Belle, took me into her office. She was calm, silver-haired, and precise in the way of women who have survived decades of men, assuming they can be rushed. I need records on every withdrawal over the last 6 months, I said. Pulled up my account, then frowned. What is it? I asked. There were several transfers. How many? She printed the history, instead of answering. That was when I knew the number would hurt. 6 transfers, all below internal review thresholds. All routed first into our joint household account, then out to an escrow deposit, a wire service, and something labeled LC Consulting. Total amount, $184,000. My mother had left me $213,000. There was $21,843.12 remaining. My hands went numb around the paper. I didn't authorize these, I said. His expression changed. Not sympathy yet. Procedure first. Some were initiated online using your credentials. 2 were supported by a notarized spousal authorization. I never signed that. She looked at me carefully. Do you feel safe going home today? That question nearly broke me, because it was the first one that did not treat me like a paperwork problem. I don't know, I said. Made copies. She froze external transfer privileges. She gave me a fraud packet and the name of an attorney who handled financial abuse and forged instruments. Then she did something I will never forget. She slid a box of tissues across the desk and said, "You do not need to be embarrassed. People who steal from spouses depend on embarrassment." I thought of Mason telling me not to panic. I thought of his hand on her stomach. I thought of my mother in her hospital bed, warning me not because she hated my husband, but because some part of her had seen the shape of him more clearly than I had. On the way out, called after me. "One more thing," she said. "The notary on that authorization works at a title office, Briar Hollow Title and Escrow." I turned around. "That's the same company on the notice," I said. "Yes," replied. And if they notarized a forged signature, someone there either made a mistake or helped make a crime. Crime! The word steadied me. Betrayal was messy. Marriage was emotional. Crime was clean enough to document. Also printed the login records. My account had been accessed at midnight, early morning, and once during my mother's memorial luncheon, when I had been standing between floral arrangements, accepting condolences from people who barely knew what to say. The thought of Mason leaving the reception, stepping into a quiet hallway, and logging into my inheritance while my mother's friends ate sandwiches made something inside me go very still. There are betrayals that stab forward, and betrayals that reach backward and ruin the memory of rooms you thought were sacred. On one printout, my mother's name still appeared as the original transfer source from her estate. Seeing it there, above Mason's withdrawals, made me feel as if he had reached past me and put his hand directly into her coffin. It was theft with ancestry. Mason was waiting in the kitchen when I got home, not pacing, not frantic, sitting at the island with his sleeves rolled up, my escrow notice in front of him, his expression arranged into exhausted patience. He had always been good at entering a room as if he had been burdened by my reaction before I had even had it. "Where were you?" he asked. "The bank." His jaw tightened, then released. I placed the printed withdrawals beside the notice. "Explain it." He looked at the pages. He did not deny them. That was the second time he told me the truth by accident. "It's complicated," he said. "No, it's numbers." He leaned back, rubbing his face. "I used some of the inheritance to secure an investment property. It was supposed to be temporary." "An investment property where your pregnant girlfriend lives." His eyes sharpened. There was the real Mason, just for a second, not ashamed, annoyed that I had moved faster than expected. "Don't use words like that." "Pregnant. Girlfriend." I laughed once. It sounded nothing like me. He stood, "Is vulnerable, she doesn't have anyone. The baby changed things." "The baby." "I was going to tell you." "When, after the first birthday." He flinched, but only because the line had landed well. It wasn't planned. Stealing my inheritance and buying a house in my name wasn't planned. It is not stealing if it's marital property. There it was, the sentence that had probably been sitting ready inside him for months. My mother's warning walked back into the room. "It was separate property," I said. "Do you hear yourself?" His voice softened, which meant he was reaching for the knife with velvet on the handle. "Your mother is dead. That money is not her. You keep acting like protecting an account is the same as honoring her." For a moment, grief rose up and blocked my throat. He saw it. He mistook it for weakness. "We can fix this," he said, stepping closer. "But not if you turn it into a war. Is carrying my child. I know I hurt you, I know, but there are bigger responsibilities now." A year earlier, I might have heard the word responsibility and bent myself around it. I was trained for that. Daughter, wife, peacekeeper. Woman who made rooms smoother after men broke things in them. This time, I heard something else. He was not asking forgiveness. He was asking me to help hide the evidence. "Who signed my name?" I asked. He froze. "On the mortgage, on the spousal authorization, on the escrow papers. Who signed my name?" His face hardened. "You're emotional." "I'm accurate." He moved past me and grabbed his keys. "I'm going to give you time to calm down." Before he reached the door, he turned. "My family knows," he said. "They know everything, and they agree this is best handled privately." Of all the things he could have said, that was the one that changed my fear into fury. His family knew, which meant this was not only an affair. It was a committee. After he left, I walked through the townhouse touching ordinary things. The chipped blue mug, the framed vacation photo, the blanket we bought during our first winter together. I was searching for the exact moment the house stopped being mine and became a set he had built around me. There was no single moment. That was the cruelty. He had not transformed overnight. He had simply revealed that the tenderness I trusted had always existed alongside a private permission to use me. I slept on the couch that night even though Mason was gone. The bedroom felt contaminated by all the conversations we had had there about budgets, future houses, someday children, and patience. It is hard to lie alone in a bed after learning someone else used your trust as collateral. Mason's sister invited me to dinner 2 days later. Her name was, and she had perfected the family art of kindness that came with instructions. She texted as if nothing had happened. "Come over Sunday, we all need to breathe. Mom is making lasagna." I almost ignored it. Then I realized useful people often reveal themselves when they think they are managing you. So I went. Harlan's house smelled like garlic, polish, and moral superiority. Mason was there, of course. So was his father, quiet and useless in a recliner, sat at the dining table with a stack of folded napkins and the face of someone assigned to soften the blow before the execution. Kissed my cheek. My poor girl, she said. I nearly asked which poor girl she meant. The wife whose inheritance was stolen, the mistress in the stolen house, or the baby everyone had already decided outranked me. Dinner was served before the conversation began because believed carbohydrates created leverage. We sat under a framed family portrait where Mason and I stood smiling from our wedding, my dead mother's pearl earrings shining at my ears. Cleared her throat. This situation is painful for everyone. I set down my fork. Is it? Mason's foot shifted under the table, reached across and touched my wrist. We're not excusing what Mason did. That's good. But is pregnant. Everyone looked at me, as if pregnancy were a legal defense. Leaned forward. A child is coming. A Harlan child. Whatever mistakes were made, we have to think about stability. I looked at Mason. Did you tell them the house is in my name? His eyes flicked away. I asked. She removed her hand from my wrist. Dad. Mason's father stared at his plate. Recovered first. The financing was unfortunate. Unfortunate, like rain on a picnic, like traffic, like a forged mortgage. It can be corrected, continued. You sign the property over, Mason assumes the debt, has a safe home, and the divorce can proceed with dignity. There it was, clean, practiced. A plan already printed inside their heads. And my mother's inheritance. Mason looked at me with warning in his eyes. Sighed. Your mother would want you to be generous toward an innocent child. That sentence entered me like poison. My mother, I said slowly, would have called the police while you were still blessing the lasagna. Gasped as if I had slapped a priest. His face went cold. You are angry, understandably, but don't confuse anger with wisdom. No, I said, standing. I'm confusing documents with crimes. Mason followed me into the hallway. Don't make this ugly. I opened the front door. It already is, I said. You're just upset I stopped decorating it. Behind him, watched from the dining room, one hand at her throat, already casting herself as the mother of a troubled son rather than the general of a fraud. I drove home and wrote down every sentence they had said. Then I emailed attorney. On the drive back, I replayed words and heard the family system underneath them. They were not asking me to forgive because forgiveness was holy. They were asking because forgiveness would keep the furniture where it belonged. Mason as son, as mother-to-be, as matriarch, as translator, me as silent proof that nobody had crossed a line too far to return from. They wanted the room reset. I wanted the room marked as a crime scene. Had always served family dinner on white plates with gold rims. I remembered admiring them once. That night, the gold looked less like elegance and more like warning. Beautiful edges around something designed to cut you if you held it wrong. The attorney's name was, and she did not waste adjectives. I met her on Tuesday morning in an office above a pharmacy. She read the bank records, the escrow notice, the pictures of Mason's car at Briar Hollow, and my notes from the Harlan dinner. Then she looked up. Your husband did not improvise this. I know. No, she said. You feel that, I'm telling you legally. This required timing, access, a notary, and someone willing to treat your identity like office supplies. By noon, she had filed requests for the closing packet, title records, mortgage application, notary log, and digital signature metadata. By 4, she called me. Briar Hollow title is nervous. Good. Very. The next day, a woman named April agreed to meet us behind the title office during her lunch break. April was the notary listed on my spousal authorization. She was younger than I expected, with tired eyes and bitten nails. She smoked 3 cigarettes in 20 minutes and kept looking toward the office windows. I didn't know, she said before asked anything. Know what? Replied. That she wasn't you. My stomach turned. Who? April pulled a folded photocopy from her purse. It was a driver's license. My driver's license. Or close enough to hurt. My name. My birth date. A photo of a woman with dark hair and a blurred smile, enough like me to pass if you did not care. I asked. April nodded. She came in with Mr. Harlan and Mrs. Harlan. Mrs. Harlan's, his mother. Of course. April's voice shook. Said you were home recovering from a procedure and embarrassed about the money. She said was your cousin. She said you had authorized everything and that the ID was temporary because yours had been stolen. Went very still. You notarized a signature from a person who did not match the ID. April's eyes filled. My supervisor told me to process it. Name. The Pike. I knew that name too. was a title officer Mason had once invited to a barbecue. He had complimented my potato salad and asked Mason whether the deal was finally moving. At the time I thought was a work project. It was my life. April looked at me. I'm sorry, I know it doesn't fix anything. But there's a recording. What recording? Closing room camera. It records video, not audio, for security. His pen stopped. April swallowed. Told it to delete that day because the system had a storage issue. But I at first. Why? I asked. She looked at the cigarette burning between her fingers. Because laughed when she signed your name. The alley went silent. April took a small USB drive from her purse and placed it in his hand. I should have come forward sooner, she said. Yes, replied, you should have. Then she put the drive in her bag like it was something holy and dangerous. For the first time since the envelope arrived, I felt Mason's plan bend under the weight of its own arrogance. April cried harder when she talked about the laugh. She said she had gone home that night and told herself rich people had arrangements she did not understand. That was how corruption survived, by convincing the uncertain that the powerful must know something they did not. I did not comfort her. Comfort would have been too easy, and some guilt deserves to sit upright. But I did thank her for keeping the file. Late truth is still truth. It just arrives carrying the damage caused by its delay. Told April that cooperation would not erase consequences. I appreciated that. Too many apologies arrive asking to be paid immediately. April's truth mattered, but it did not make her harmless. A witness can be useful and still have helped build the cage. But would not let me watch the video alone. She said evidence changes when emotion touches it first. I did not fully understand what she meant until I sat in her office with the blinds closed, a yellow legal pad in front of her, and watched my marriage end in fluorescent light. The closing room was small. Gray carpet, fake plant, a framed print of a sailboat. Mason sat on one side of the table in the navy suit he wore to our last anniversary dinner. Sat beside him in a cream dress, one hand moving absently over her stomach, though she would not have been visibly pregnant yet. Sat across from them, not hovering, not confused, present. Pike entered carrying a stack of documents. April followed with a notary stamp, and a face that, even on silent video, looked uneasy. Picked up a pen. Mason leaned toward her and pointed at the signature line. She signed my name. I had imagined forgery as something tense. Careful wrist, nervous glance, fear of being caught. Signed quickly, almost cheerfully. The loops were wrong. My C was too round, my H too sharp. She paused afterward, looked at Mason and smiled. Then she laughed. No sound, just her shoulders lifting, her mouth opening, her head tipping back while my husband grinned beside her. Paused the video. I stared at the frozen image, laughing over my stolen signature. Mason smiling, watching like a queen approving a treaty. Do you want to stop? Asked. No. We watched the rest. Mason signed several documents as himself, pointed to a page and spoke with obvious authority. Stamped, flipped, guided. April hesitated once and leaned close enough that she stepped back and continued. The final frame showed Mason placing his hand over S on the table. Reached across and touched his cheek. Family. That was what they had built with my money. Not a house, a replacement. Closed the laptop. This is strong. I laughed, but nothing about it was funny. Strong. For court, for police, for the bank, for the mortgage company, for divorce. What about for humiliation? She studied me. I'm serious. I know. I leaned back and looked at the ceiling. They invited me to her baby shower. Did not blink. Of course they did. The invitation had arrived that morning, pale green with gold lettering. Celebrating baby Harlan. Hosted by Harlan. Co-hosted by Harlan. Registry included nursery furniture, stroller, and a baby monitor set. Location, Briar Hollow Lane. My house. The house bought in my name, with my mother's money, for my husband's mistress. They want me there, I said. They think if I show up, it proves I accept it. They want a photograph, said. The wronged wife smiling beside the pregnant woman. It helps them socially. It may also help them legally if they later claim you consented to an arrangement. The final piece clicked into place. They were not just cruel. They were still building paperwork. I looked at the black laptop screen and saw my reflection inside it, pale and steady. Then I'll give them a different kind of record, I said. Sighed, don't commit a crime. I won't. Don't interfere with an investigation. I won't. Don't play original evidence unless we have copies. I looked at her. For the first time that week, she smiled. We have copies, she said. I asked to freeze the frame where Mason pointed to the signature line. His index finger hovered over my printed name as if he were guiding through a recipe. That image stayed with me longer than the laugh, the ease of it, the domesticity of it. He was not nervous. He was not desperate. He looked helpful. That was when I understood how many crimes are committed by people who believe they are simply solving their own inconvenience with someone else's life. After the video, labeled every file with timestamps and chain of custody notes, I watched her turn my humiliation into evidence. It should have felt cold. Instead, it felt merciful. Pain becomes less shapeless when someone gives it a folder and a legal name. The baby shower invitation was only the beginning. Sent a follow-up email to the entire extended family 2 days later. She wrote in the warm, wounded tone of a woman who had discovered the public relations value of forgiveness. We know this family has been through a difficult season, but baby boy Harlan deserves to arrive surrounded by love, has been invited, and we hope everyone will respect privacy, healing, and the importance of unity. Privacy, healing, unity. 3 words, often used by people who have already chosen the victim. Then I saw the registry. Crib, $1,299. Rocking chair, $842. Designer stroller, $1,100. Gift card, fund labeled nesting in our first home. Our first home. I sent the link to. She replied 4 minutes later. Do not buy anything. For the first time in days, I laughed. Mason returned home that night to collect clothes. He found me at the kitchen table, with the registry open on my laptop. His face changed. You got the invitation. I did. Mom thinks it would help if you came. Help who? He set a folded garment bag over a chair. Everyone. There was that word again. Everyone meant Mason. Mason's mother, Mason's mistress, Mason's unborn child. It never meant me unless I was useful as furniture. He sat across from me. I know you're angry, but there's a way to handle this with grace. Forgery first, grace second. His eyes darkened. Be careful. The old me would have heard danger in that. The new me heard evidence. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. If you go nuclear, you'll hurt an innocent baby. I closed the laptop. You put a mortgage in my name. I was going to refinance it. You stole my mother's money. I borrowed from our future. You slept with. He looked away. I fell in love. The phrase almost made me laugh again. Fell. As if betrayal were weather. As if he had tripped into another woman and landed on a loan application. Mason leaned forward. Scared. Mom is trying to keep the family from splitting apart. I need you to think beyond revenge. I am. Good. Relief flashed across his face. I'm thinking about criminal liability, civil damages, quiet title action, divorce discovery, and whether the baby shower has a projector. The relief vanished. For 1 second, he looked exactly like the man on the closing video after Sign My Name. Entitled, irritated, accustomed to doors opening. You don't want to become this person, he said. No, I replied. I think you don't want to meet her. He left without his garment bag. Inside the bag was the charcoal suit he had worn when we buried my mother. I sat with that for a long time. He had stood beside me at her graveside, one arm around my shoulders, while already taking the money she had left to protect me. That was the night I stopped grieving my marriage. A person cannot mourn a house that was never real once she finds the blueprints for the trap. Later that night, I opened the forgotten garment bag again. The suit still smelled faintly of cedar and Mason's cologne. I remembered him at my mother's burial, squeezing my shoulder when the priest said ashes to ashes. Everyone told me I was lucky to have such a steady husband. I had believed them. Now the suit lay across the chair like a prop from a scene staged for my benefit. Grief, I learned, can be used as camouflage. People lower their guard around mourning. Predators know that. The registry taught me how confident they had become. Thieves who fear consequences do not ask strangers to buy velvet curtains for the crime scene. They had mistaken my silence for consent, my grief for weakness, and Mason's charm for insulation. All 3 were expiring. Called me on a block number 3 days before the shower. I almost ignored it. Then something in me said answer. Her voice was softer than I expected. Yes, it's. I know. A pause. I was hoping we could talk like women. That phrase usually means one woman is about to ask another to accept damage quietly, so a man can remain comfortable. Talk, I said. She exhaled shakily. I know this is painful. I know the way things happen wasn't ideal. Wasn't ideal. I never wanted to hurt you. You signed my name on mortgage documents. Silence. Then in a smaller voice, Mason said you agreed. The lie was so quick, so predictable, that it almost disappointed me. He said I agreed to let you impersonate me. He said the money was complicated, that you were separated emotionally, that you didn't want children, and he did, and the house would eventually be transferred properly. I closed my eyes. He had not only stolen from me, he had written a character for me: cold wife, grieving hoarder, obstacle to family. I said, "Did you know the inheritance came from my dead mother?" Her breathing changed. Mason said it was family money. My family. Another pause. "You don't understand," she whispered. Said if I didn't sign, I'd lose the house and Mason would go back to you. I'm pregnant. I have nothing without him. There it was, not innocence, not full guilt either, something cowardly in between. Did tell you to sign my name. Started crying. I can't do this. Did Mason? I said I can't. Did no. She hung up. My phone had recorded the entire call. I had not planned to record every call after, told me state law allowed one-party consent where we lived, but I had done it anyway. Fear makes you practical if you let it. I sent the file to. She called immediately. Do not respond if calls again. She admitted, pressured her. She implied it. Useful but not enough. It does tell us something important. What? They're fracturing. By that afternoon, texted me from a number with her name attached. Please don't ruin the shower. I know mistakes were made. The baby did nothing wrong. I stared at it for several minutes. She was right about the baby. The baby had done nothing wrong. That truth did not make the adults innocent. Mason texted 10 minutes later. Whatever she said, she's emotional. Don't use it against her. Texted after that. Grace is remembered longer than anger. I took screenshots of all 3 messages and saved them in a folder labeled shower. Then I called the event rental company listed at the bottom of invitation. I pretended to be confirming the video montage setup for baby Harlan's celebration. The woman on the phone was cheerful and helpful. Yes, ma'am, she said. Projector and screen included. HDMI ready. Mrs. Harlan requested family photos. Family photos. Perfect. I ordered a small adapter and 2 backup flash drives. Not because I was reckless, because I was done letting them be the only people allowed to prepare. I listened to call 3 times, not because I enjoyed it, but because I needed to separate my hatred from the information. Her fear was real. Her choices were real too. That was hard for me to hold at the same time. Mason had turned both of us into tools, but only one of us had signed my name. Pain explained her. It did not erase her. I wrote that in my notebook because I knew I would need the sentence later when pity tried to become self-betrayal. This blocked call changed the weather of the case. Until then, the evidence had shown what happened. Her fear hinted at why it happened and who stood behind it. Mason had not only betrayed me, he had recruited every frightened person nearby into helping him finish the betrayal. The morning of baby shower, I dressed like a witness. Black suit, white blouse, my mother's pearl earrings. No mascara because I had learned tears can be used against you if they fall at the wrong angle. In my purse were 3 flash drives, printed bank records, a certified copy of the escrow notice, screenshots of the registry, the call transcript, and a letter from stating that I was disputing all mortgage obligations due to suspected fraud. There was also a baby blanket. I had bought it the night before from a small store my mother loved. Soft gray cotton, no monogram, no message. I did not buy it for Mason. I did not buy it for. I bought it because the baby was a person, not a shield, and I refused to let their ugliness make me uglier in the one place it did not have the right to touch. Hated the idea of me going. You are walking into a room full of people invested in misunderstanding you, she said on speakerphone as I checked my reflection. I know. You do not owe them theater. They built the stage. And if police are called, I'll wait outside. She sighed. You have my number on speed dial. Yes. Do not say anything that sounds like a threat. I won't. Do not touch anyone. I won't. Do not throw cake. Despite everything, I smiled. That one hurts. I promise. Briar Hollow Lane looked different with cars lining both sides. Balloons were tied to the mailbox. Blue, silver, white. A sign on the lawn read Welcome Baby Harlan in looping script. Beneath it, the house glowed with the obscene confidence of something stolen and decorated before the owner came to see it. My name was on the mortgage. My mother's money was in the walls. My husband's mistress was inside accepting gifts. I parked 2 houses away and sat with both hands on the steering wheel until my breathing slowed. People talk about revenge like fire. Mine felt like ice. I was not going in to scream. Screaming would give them a story they could use. I was going in to let their own images speak in a room where they had expected me to smile. A neighbor waved as she carried a wrapped gift toward the porch. She looked at me with the bright curiosity of someone who did not know whether I was a guest or a scandal. Both, I thought. Inside, the foyer smelled like vanilla candles and new paint. The walls were soft beige. A framed ultrasound sat on the entry table beside a silver bowl of blue-wrapped chocolates. Saw me first. Her face performed joy, surprise, and alarm in that order. She said too loudly, "You came." Every conversation within 10 feet softened. I held up the gift bag with the blanket. I was invited. Appeared at the bottom of the stairs in a pale blue dress, one hand on her stomach, her eyes swollen like she had been crying before the guests arrived. Mason came in from the living room. For 1 second, all 4 of us stood in the stolen foyer under a banner that said, "Oh baby," then smiled and reached for my arm. "Let's keep today beautiful," she whispered. I looked past her at the projector screen, waiting in the living room. "We will," I said. Before I got out of the car, I called my mother's old voicemail. Her number had been disconnected, of course, but for months after she died, I still dialed it when I needed courage. This time, a mechanical voice told me the number was no longer in service. I sat there listening to that stranger's voice and understood that I had been waiting for permission from the dead. Then I put the phone down, picked up my purse, and gave permission to myself. I almost turned around twice. Once at the stop sign near our old coffee shop, and once when I saw the balloons. Courage is not a straight line. Sometimes it is missing the exit, circling the block, and still parking the car. The shower was a masterpiece of denial. There were tiny quiches, blue cupcakes, mason jars tied with ribbons, and a photo table featuring Mason as a child. As a child, and empty frames waiting for a baby who had already been recruited into everyone else's excuses. Guests hugged Mason like a widower of his own bad choices. They congratulated. They thanked for hosting. Some recognized me and looked away too quickly. Others stared openly, trying to decide whether my presence meant forgiveness or imminent weather. Approached with a clipboard. "We're starting games soon." "What game?" "Guess the baby trait." Her smile trembled. Eyes, hair, personality. I looked at Mason across the room. He was laughing with Pike. Head come. The title officer who helped process the forged closing was standing beside the punch bowl, wearing a baby blue tie. My pulse slowed further. Followed my gaze and swallowed. "Please don't do anything today." "Anything like what?" "You know what I mean." "No," I said, "I don't think I do." She leaned closer. "Mom says you have documents. Mason says you're trying to scare everyone. But if this becomes public, the baby loses stability. The baby is not paying the mortgage. Please," her eyes filled with tears. "You can still be the bigger person." I almost felt sorry for her. Had spent her whole life translating control into language softer people could obey. "Being bigger doesn't mean becoming a hiding place," I said. She had no answer. The games began at 2. Guests gathered in the living room while stood near the projector with a remote. Behind her, the screen displayed a title, "A New Harlan Beginning." A new Harlan beginning. In a house owned by a Harlan wife they had attempted to erase. Tapped her glass. "Before we begin, Mason and wanted to share a little video montage. Family is complicated, but love always finds its way." Mason looked at me sharply. He had not known about a video montage. Looked confused too. That was when I understood had prepared her own performance. Maybe baby pictures. Maybe Mason talking about second chances. Maybe some careful arrangement where my presence in the room became proof that everyone had chosen peace. The screen lit up with Mason as a toddler. Oz moved through the room. I walked toward the projector table. "Noticed me too late." "My turn," I said softly. I did not shove. I did not grab. I simply unplugged the laptop and connected my flash drive with the adapter I had brought. The room laughed at first, unsure whether this was planned. Mason crossed the room. "Stop." I held the remote. "If you touch me," I said quietly, "you will do it in front of 30 witnesses." He stopped. That was the thing about men like Mason. They were brave in kitchens and careful in crowds. I turned to the guests. "Before anyone gives another gift for this house," I said, "you should know whose name is on it." Then I pressed play. The strangest part was how beautiful everything looked. Sunlight moved over the cupcakes. Someone had arranged eucalyptus along the mantel. A guest laughed near the kitchen with one hand on a gift bag and the other around a mimosa. If a stranger had walked in, they would have seen love, abundance, celebration. That is why public images are dangerous. They do not show whose money paid for the flowers. They do not show whose name is buried under the welcome mat. presence told me something important. He did not think of himself as a criminal. He thought of himself as a professional attending a family event. That is how deep the rot went. The people who moved the paperwork still expected cake. The first slide was simple. Property, 418 Briar Hollow Lane. Mortgage holder, Greenstone Federal. Borrower, Harlan. The room went silent in layers. People first read my name, then looked at, then Mason, then back at the screen. Moved toward me. This is not appropriate. I did not look at her. Neither was forging my signature. The second slide showed the bank transfers from my inheritance account. $42,000, $31,500, $28,000, $50,000, $17,500, $15,000. Dates. Account endings. Destination labels. My mother died last year, I said. This was the money she left me. It was moved without my consent to fund this house. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Mason's face had gone gray. Started crying immediately. Not because she was sorry. Because the room had turned. Then the closing video began. There are moments when a crowd becomes one body. This was one of them. 30 people inhaled together as appeared on screen, seated beside Mason at the title office table. Pike entered carrying documents. Appeared in the frame. April with the notary stamp. No audio, it did not need audio. The image of signing my name was clear. Her laughing afterward was clearer. The room did not move. Mason lunged toward the projector. My cousin Tessa, who I did not even know was there until that moment, stepped between him and the table. Don't. He looked at her like he might push past. Tessa raised her phone. She was recording. Mason stopped again. The video ended on the frame of Touching's cheek. I advanced to the next file. Call filled the room from the speaker system. Her voice shaking, mind steady, her words landing one by one. Said if I didn't sign, I'd lose the house and Mason would go back to you. Made a sound I had never heard from her before. Not a sob, not a denial, more like a door being kicked open inside her chest. That was private, she said. No, I replied. Private is a family matter, this is financial fraud. Started backing toward the hallway. Stepped in from the foyer. I had not known she would come. Later she told me she parked down the street because she did not trust anyone who served quiche over forged paper. Mr. Pike, she said, you may want to stay available. He froze. Mason pointed at me. She is trying to destroy my child's life. For the first time that day, I raised my voice. No, Mason, you used your child to decorate a crime. That sentence landed harder than any document. Sat down slowly on the couch, one hand on her stomach. For a second, I felt the complicated ache of pity. She was guilty. She was also trapped by a story Mason and had sold her because it served them. But pity was not surrender. I placed the baby blanket on the gift table. For the child, I said, not for any of you. Then I walked out, while the room behind me broke into voices. When the screen showed signing, I heard a small sound behind me. It came from, not a gasp, not a sob, something smaller and more human, recognition. She had known pieces, maybe more than pieces, but seeing the act made denial harder to hold. I did not turn around. I needed the room to face forward. For once, all of them had to look at the thing they had asked me to swallow. The video made the room honest faster than any speech could have. They could argue with my tone, my grief, my anger, my timing. They could not argue with hand moving across the paper or Mason pointing to where my name belonged. Nobody clapped. Real exposure does not feel like the movies. There is no clean cheer, no swelling music, no instant justice. There is only the wet, ugly sound of people realizing they are present inside someone else's evidence. Outside, I stood on the porch and called the police non-emergency line because told me to let procedure arrive before gossip did. Tessa came out with me, still holding her phone. I got everything, she said. I looked at my cousin, who had once asked me why I always apologized before asking for salt. Why? She shrugged. Because I remember how Mason talked over you at Christmas. That nearly made me cry. Inside, Mason was shouting, was crying loudly enough to reframe herself as harmed, was quieter. The guests began leaving in small guilty clusters. Gift bags dangling from their hands like evidence they did not know where to put. A woman I barely recognized stopped near the porch steps. I didn't know, she said. I nodded. She waited, perhaps hoping I would absolve her for attending a party in my stolen house. I did not. Police arrived 27 minutes later. Met them in the foyer with copies of everything because did not believe in dramatic pauses when a stapled packet would do. Pike tried to claim misunderstanding. April's statement contradicted him. claimed she had been supporting a vulnerable mother. Said very little. Mason kept saying my name like he owned the volume of it. Listen, don't do this. You're making it worse. The officer finally told him to stop addressing me. That was when Mason looked truly shocked. Not when I showed the video. Not when the guests stared. When another man told him my attention was no longer his property. Greenstone Federal froze the mortgage file that afternoon. Harbor Crest confirmed the fraud claim. Briar Hollow title suspended by Monday morning. April gave a formal statement Tuesday. By Wednesday, Saturni contacted. Mason did not come home. Good. I changed the locks anyway. The next week was not empowering. It was paperwork, nausea, phone calls, and sleep that came in broken pieces. People online would later call me iconic because Tessa's video leaked through a cousin of a cousin and spread on local social media. They turned my pain into captions. They called me queen. They called trash. They called Mason worse. I did not feel like a queen. I felt like a woman whose mother's last protection had been stolen by the man who held her at the funeral. But there were moments, small ones, from the bank called to say, "We have enough to pursue reversal." Said the district attorney is interested. Tessa texted, "I'm proud of you." And one morning, while making coffee, I realized I had gone 12 whole minutes without wondering what Mason would say about my choices. That felt like opening a window. That evening, I took off my mother's pearl earrings and placed them in a small dish by the sink. My ears ached from wearing them all day. I realized I had chosen them hoping some part of her would come with me into that house. Maybe she had, maybe not. What mattered was that I had not betrayed the woman who warned me. I had walked into the room where they spent her money and said, in the only language they respected, "Here are the records." The next morning, the shower flowers were still visible through the front windows. Blue hydrangeas on a table beside police tape. That image stayed with me. People think ugliness announces itself, but sometimes it sits beside flowers and waits for guests. Asked to meet 2 weeks after the shower. Said absolutely not. Then Saturni sent a formal cooperation offer. Said maybe. We met in a conference room at a family law office with bad art and excellent security cameras. Arrived in a gray maternity dress, no makeup, eyes swollen. Her attorney sat beside her. Sat beside me. Between us lay a box of documents thick enough to ruin several lives. Did not look at me when she began. I knew it wasn't right, she said. Wrote that down, be specific. Swallowed. Mason told me the marriage was over. He said refused to divorce because she wanted to punish him. He said the inheritance was already half his because they had planned to buy a house before her mother died. That was false, said. I know that now. Did you know it then? His hand tightened on her stomach. I knew enough to be scared of asking. That answer was the first honest thing I had ever heard from her. She described his involvement in detail. Had explained that was difficult and unstable from grief. Had brought the fake ID. Mason had supplied my social security number, payroll records, and a scanned copy of my real driver's license from our household files. Had signed because Mason promised the home would be transferred before anyone knew. Before I knew, I said. Looked at me then, yes. It was not enough. Nothing would be enough, but it was something shaped like truth. Why cooperate now? I asked. Her eyes filled again. Because after the shower, Mason said we should say it was all me. He said pregnant women get sympathy. He said you hated me enough that no one would believe me if I blamed him. There he was. Mason, always finding the woman nearest the consequences and measuring whether she could carry them for him. Slid her phone across the table. I recorded him. On the screen was a voice memo. Looked at me. I nodded. Mason's voice played from the phone, low and angry. You signed, my mother and I can say we thought consented. Can say you presented the ID. You want to keep the baby safe, then stop talking. The room changed. Cried silently while the recording continued. Mason told her I was vindictive. He told her the house would be gone if she cooperated. He told her no judge would punish a pregnant woman if she kept the story simple. When it ended, asked for a copy. Saturni nodded. I looked at for a long time. I don't forgive you, I said. She closed her eyes. I know. But the baby deserves adults who stop lying before he is born. Her face broke then, not prettily, not usefully. Just broke. Outside said, that recording changes leverage. Against Mason. Against everyone. I thought I would feel triumphant. Instead, I felt tired in a clean way. Justice was not a lightning strike. It was a stack of women, finally refusing to be the easiest place for a man to hide. Watching hand over the recording forced me to confront an uncomfortable truth. Victims and accomplices are not always separate categories. Sometimes people are harmed and then pass the harm along because it buys them one more hour of safety. Mason understood that. Understood it better. They had counted on being frightened enough and me being ashamed enough. The entire scheme rested on women carrying different corners of the same lie, while the man in the middle called it love. I did not like seeing myself reflected in Sphere. Not because our choices were the same, but because Mason had used the same tool on both of us. The threat of losing love if we became inconvenient. She obeyed longer. I had only escaped earlier. Called me on a Sunday morning. I almost did not answer. Then I remembered her telling 30 people that family meant unity while standing inside a house bought with my mother's money. I pressed record. She said, voice trembling in a way she had probably practiced, "I think we should speak mother to daughter. You are not my mother." The silence that followed was the first gift she ever gave me. "I loved you like one." "No," I said. "You liked me when I made Mason look stable." Her inhale sharpened. "This bitterness is beneath you. Fraud is beneath you too, but here we are. Drop the softness. Do you understand what you are doing to this family?" "Yes." "You are humiliating a pregnant woman." "Is cooperating." Another silence. This one was better. "What does that mean?" "It means she chose a door you didn't build." His voice turned cold enough to frost the phone. "That girl will say anything to save herself. That girl signed my name because you brought her a fake ID. I protected my son." There it was. 3 words, clean, owned, deadly. I said nothing because silence is how you make people keep filling the room. Continued. "Mason made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But you have no idea what it is like to be a mother. To see your child trapped in a dead marriage, drowning beside a woman who had become nothing but grief and suspicion." My hand tightened around the phone. "My mother died," I said. "And you made your whole house into a shrine." For a moment, pain almost won. Then I thought of my mother's hospital room, her thin hand around mine, her voice telling me to be careful with what she left. "You stole from that shrine," I said. Laughed once, small and bitter. "I moved money from a dead woman to a living child." There it was again, the baby as altar, theft as charity. "You moved money to keep your son comfortable," I said. "My son deserves happiness. And I deserved my signature." She said nothing. "You should call your lawyer. You think court will heal you." "No," I said, "but it will translate you." I hung up, sent the recording to the investigator within an hour. The phrase, "I protected my son," became more useful than could have imagined. So did "I moved money." People like believed intent could purify action. The law, it turned out, preferred verbs. Moved, protected, stole, forged. By Tuesday, had retained criminal counsel. By Friday, Mason tried to freeze our joint accounts and failed because had already beaten him to the courthouse. The judge granted a temporary restraining order, preventing him from selling, transferring, refinancing, or occupying the Briar Hollow property. My house for now stood empty, moved in with her aunt. The baby shower photos disappeared from social media, but screenshots had already made their own little graveyard. Everywhere I looked, the image was collapsing. Not the marriage, that had collapsed earlier. The performance, the part where they hurt me, and still expected to be seen as the decent people in the room. After the call, I made tea and let it go cold on the counter. His voice kept echoing in my head, not because it was powerful, but because it was familiar. I had heard versions of it my whole life from women who believed sacrifice was the rent other women paid to remain respectable. Be gracious. Be bigger. Think of the family. They never said, think of yourself. That omission had cost me almost everything. His confession was not dramatic enough for television. No villain's speech, no collapse, just an entitled mother saying the quiet part in a tired voice. That made it more frightening. She had lived with the sentence long enough that it sounded reasonable to her. Courtrooms are nothing like revenge fantasies. They are beige, over-air-conditioned, and full of people whispering near vending machines. The first hearing lasted 11 minutes and aged me 3 years. Mason wore the charcoal suit from my mother's funeral. I noticed immediately. Maybe he thought it made him look serious. Maybe he forgot. Maybe cruelty becomes habit before it becomes strategy. His attorney argued that the Briar Hollow transaction was part of a complex marital investment plan made during a period of emotional distance, stood and used fewer words. "Your Honor, my client did not attend the closing. My client did not authorize the down payment transfers. My client did not sign the mortgage paperwork. We have video of another woman signing her name." The judge looked over his glasses. That was enough for the room to change. Mason stared at the table, sat behind him with a scarf tied too neatly around her throat, sat on the other side of the aisle with her attorney, hands folded over her stomach, not looking at anyone. Temporary orders became stronger. The court froze disputed assets. Greenstone Federal agreed to suspend enforcement against me pending investigation. The title company's insurer entered the conversation, which said was a good sign because insurance people do not join fires unless they smell liability. The criminal side moved more slowly. Financial crimes often do. They like documents more than emotions, and documents take time to gather. But the divorce moved. Mason tried apology in a mediation room. "I lost myself," he said. I looked at. She did not look back because she knew I needed to handle this part. "No," I said. "You found a version of yourself that benefited from me not looking." He rubbed his eyes. "I loved you once." "That may be true. You don't care." "I care that you used love as a receipt for things you stole." His apology died there. Then came anger. "You're going to make me lose my son. Your son is not a consequence I control. You'll take everything." "I'm taking back what was mine." Mason leaned forward. "Your mother would be ashamed of this." The room went so still, I could hear the fluorescent light. Started to speak, I raised my hand. "My mother," I said, "saw you more clearly while dying than I did while living with you. Do not borrow her name again." For the first time since the envelope arrived, Mason had no reply. Mediation failed. Good. Some failures are clean. By late summer, the title company settled part of the civil claim. Harbor Crest recovered most of the transferred inheritance through fraud reversal and insurer pressure. The Briar Hollow house remained tangled in litigation, too contaminated to belong simply to anyone. I visited it once with a court-appointed property inspector. The nursery was still painted pale blue. A crib sat unassembled in the corner. For a moment, sadness moved through me in a way that had no target. So much harm had been arranged around a child who had not yet taken a breath when the adults began building lies for him to live inside. I placed my hand on the doorframe and whispered, "I'm sorry." Not to Mason, not to the future they had tried to mortgage before it arrived. The inspector asked whether I planned to keep the house if the court cleared the title. I laughed before I could stop myself. Keep it. Live under a roof chosen by my husband for another woman. Sleep in a room where every wall remembered a lie. No, some assets are poisoned. You can recover their value maybe, but not their meaning. I wanted the house turned back into money, and the money turned back into distance. I learned to bring a sweater to every hearing and protein bars, to every courthouse morning. Justice has logistics. Nobody tells you that. You arrive expecting moral clarity and instead discover vending machines, continuances, missing forms, and the need to keep your blood sugar steady. Baby was born in September. I learned from Tessa, who apparently still believed family news should travel even after family trust had died. A boy, 7 pounds 9 ounces, healthy. His name was Oliver. Mason texted me a photo at 2:14 in the morning. "Whatever you think of me, he deserves family." I looked at the baby's face, red and furious at the world, and felt something tender and painful move inside me. Then I looked at Mason's sentence and felt it freeze. He was already beginning. Deserves family, meaning deserves my silence, deserves my money, deserves my willingness to pretend his father had not forged documents before buying diapers. I replied through only, "Congratulations on the birth. All communication regarding legal matters must go through counsel." Mason sent 3 more messages. I did not answer. Sent 1. "He is here. I know I don't deserve to ask for anything, but I wanted you to know he is safe." I did answer that. "I'm glad he is safe." Nothing more. There are boundaries that look cruel only to people who benefited from your lack of them. 2 weeks later, gave a formal sworn statement. She arrived with dark circles under her eyes and a diaper bag beside her chair. Oliver slept in a car seat in the corner of the conference room, tiny fists closed, unaware that his mother's testimony would help determine whether his father faced charges. Told the truth. Not beautifully, not bravely in the clean way people love. She cried. She contradicted herself once. She tried to soften her own choices until her attorney redirected her, but she told enough of the truth to matter. Mason had planned the house months before the pregnancy was public, had arranged the fake ID, had agreed to keep things efficient. Mason had accessed my inheritance information after my mother's funeral under the pretense of helping me organize documents. The property had been intended as temporary shelter for until Mason could make accept reality. Accept reality. That was what abusers often call the world they built without your consent. Oliver slept through most of it. At one point, he fussed and rocked him while answering questions about the forged signature. The contrast was almost unbearable. A mother soothing a child while describing the crime that had been committed in his name before he was born. Afterward, approached me in the parking lot. "I'm sorry," she said. "I know. I don't know how to make it right." "You can't." She nodded. Tears slipped down her face, but she did not perform them. That helped. "You can make it less wrong going forward," I said. She looked at Oliver's car seat. "I'm trying." For the first time, I believed her. That did not mean forgiveness. People confuse forgiveness with the end of anger. Sometimes forgiveness is not available, and what comes instead is a refusal to let anger choose your next cruelty. I drove home and opened the account my mother had left me. Most of the money had been restored. Not all, not yet, but enough that the balance no longer looked like a crime scene. I placed my mother's photo beside the laptop and cried for the first time without feeling watched. For a while, I hated how often the baby made me soften. It felt like betrayal of myself. Then told me, during one of our many expensive conversations that sounded suspiciously like therapy, that softness was not the enemy. Confusion was. I could wish a child safety and still demand restitution. I could hope became stronger and still refuse her friendship. I could let Oliver be innocent without making his existence a broom for everyone else's guilt. Oliver's existence complicated the story in the way real life always complicates clean rage. I could hate what was done around him without hating him. That distinction became important. It kept my anger aimed at adults who made choices, not a child who inherited consequences. Mason pleaded to 2 felony counts and 1 reduced fraud charge the following spring. People expected me to feel satisfied. I did sometimes, not because he might go to prison. He did not, at least not immediately. White-collar domestic fraud has a way of landing softer than broken bones. He received probation, restitution obligations, community service, and a suspended sentence that would become very real if he violated the terms. Lost his license and faced his own charges. Entered a diversion agreement that required restitution and a formal admission of involvement. It was not enough. It was also more than they ever thought would happen. At sentencing, Mason read a statement. He said he was ashamed. He said love had made him irrational. He said fear of losing his child had clouded his judgment. The judge interrupted him. "Mr. Harlan, the fraudulent acts occurred before the child was born." Mason blinked. I wrote that sentence in my notebook, not because I needed to remember it, because I wanted to preserve the exact moment someone official refused to let him hide behind a baby. When it was my turn, I stood with my statement in both hands and did not read most of it. "I lost money," I said. "I lost a marriage. I lost the last illusion I had about the family I married into. But the worst theft was not financial. The worst theft was that they tried to make me complicit in my own erasure. They wanted me to sign over the house, smile at the shower, and become evidence that what they did was forgivable before it was even acknowledged." I looked at Mason. He did not make one mistake. He built a system of lies and invited everyone to call it love. Looked down. Good. The Briar Hollow house was sold under court supervision. After liens, fees, and restitution, the remainder went toward restoring my inheritance and resolving the fraudulent mortgage. I never lived in it. I never wanted to. Some houses are not homes. They are crime scenes with crown molding. Mason moved into a 1-bedroom apartment near his office. Stopped hosting holiday dinners for a while. Sent me 1 letter apologizing for trying to make me the peaceful one. I kept it because it was rare to see someone name their own cowardice without decorating it. Moved 2 counties away with Oliver. I heard she worked part-time for a medical billing office and lived with her aunt until she could afford a small rental. Mason had supervised visits at first. Later, that changed. I did not follow the details. People asked whether I hated. The answer depended on the day. Some days, yes. Some days, I understood that Mason had not picked her because she was powerful. He picked her because she was easier to frighten than I had become. Understanding is not absolution. It is simply a map. My divorce finalized in June. I walked out of the courthouse with my own name returned to me, not legally, because I had never changed it, but internally, which mattered more. Harlan had entered marriage as a woman who apologized when other people dropped knives. Harlan left it holding receipts. After sentencing, Mason tried to catch my eye in the hallway. I looked past him to the exit sign instead. It glowed red above the courthouse doors, ordinary and miraculous. For years, I had thought leaving a marriage meant one dramatic decision. It is actually hundreds of smaller ones, not turning when he says your name, not explaining when he misunderstands on purpose, not mistaking his regret for repair. That day, my decision was simple. I kept walking. When Mason heard the sentence, he looked smaller, not because the law had crushed him, but because the performance had no audience left. Without certainty, dependence, and my silence, he was just a man in a suit explaining fraud poorly. The final restitution payment arrived 18 months after the blue envelope. It was not dramatic. No courtroom, no speech. Just an email from with the subject line, "Final transfer confirmed." I opened my bank account and saw the number. My mother's money had come home. Not perfectly. Money never returns untouched after betrayal. Legal fees, time, inflation, stress, the cost of learning that the person beside you in bed was studying your passwords. Those things do not fit into a wire transfer. But the balance was restored enough that I could breathe. I drove to the cemetery that afternoon. My mother's grave sat under a maple tree that turned violent red every October. I brought white lilies because she hated roses and called them flowers with publicists. I sat in the grass beside her stone and told her everything, not because I believed she could hear me in any literal way, because some truths need a place to land. I told her about the envelope, Mason, the video, the shower, court, Oliver, the house being sold. Then I told her she had been right. That was the hardest part. It is one thing to miss your mother. It is another to understand, too late, that she had tried to protect you from a danger you defended because it slept beside you. I thought being loved meant being generous, I said to the stone. You tried to tell me generosity needed locks. A breeze moved through the maple leaves. I sat there until the sky darkened. The next week, I used part of the restored money to buy a small house of my own. Not grand, not Briar Hollow. A brick cottage with green shutters, 2 bedrooms, a garden that needed work, and a kitchen window that caught morning light. At closing, I signed slowly. Harlan's, my own hand, my own consent, my own witness. From the bank sent flowers. Sent a card that said, in her severe handwriting, no shared passwords. Tessa helped me move and labeled one box evidence, though it only contained coffee mugs. The first night, I slept on a mattress on the floor because the bed frame had not arrived. Rain tapped the windows. No one came home late. No phone lit up with explanations. No one told me I was making things difficult by noticing reality. I woke before dawn and walked through the empty rooms. The silence did not feel lonely. It felt unoccupied by lies. In the kitchen, I made coffee and placed my mother's photo on the windowsill. Beside it, I placed the baby blanket receipt, the escrow notice, and a single printed frame from the closing video. Signing my name, Mason smiling. Not to torture myself, to remember the difference between being trusting and being asleep. Then I filed them away. A life cannot be built as a museum of harm, but it should keep an archive. Owning that cottage did not make me fearless. The first month, I checked locks twice. I changed passwords 3 times. I opened mail over the trash can like it might bite. Healing did not arrive as confidence. It arrived as repeated evidence that my door stayed closed when I closed it, my account stayed mine, my mornings belonged to me. Safety, after financial betrayal, is not a feeling at first. It is a pattern you verify until your body finally believes it. The cottage inspection found cracked grout, old wiring, and a back step that needed replacing. I loved every flaw because each one was honest. A broken step announces itself when you stand on it. That made it better than my marriage, which had looked stable until the floor opened. 2 years later, I still get asked about the baby shower. Not by everyone, just by the kind of people who hear a story about public exposure and want the satisfying parts polished for them. They want to know what face looked like, whether Mason cried, whether screamed, whether the cupcakes were good. The cupcakes were excellent. That is not the point. The point is that nobody steals your life all at once if they can convince you to hand it over in pieces. A password here, a signature there, a private account moved for convenience, a strange charge explained away, a feeling in your stomach dismissed as grief, stress, bitterness, hormones, anything except what it is. Warnings. I wish I could say I never missed Mason. That would be simpler and more heroic. But there were mornings when I missed the version of him I thought I married. The man who brought soup when I was sick. The man who held my hand at my mother's funeral. The man who kissed my forehead in grocery store lines. Then I remembered the closing video. Not because it erased the good moments, because it explained their limits. A person can be tender in one room and treacherous in another. That is what makes betrayal so hard to survive. If villains were cruel every minute, no one would marry them. Oliver turned 2 that summer. Sent a photo through, asking permission first. He had Mason's eyes and his own wild hair. I kept the photo for one day, then deleted it. Not out of hate. Out of respect for the boundary that made my life livable. Mason completed restitution and asked, through his attorney, whether I would consider a healing conversation. No, that was my entire response. Sold her house and moved closer to. And I exchanged holiday cards now, simple ones, no emotional essays. She had learned, I think, that apology is not a key. It is just a doorbell. The person inside still gets to decide whether to open. My little brick house changed slowly. I painted the kitchen blue, planted rosemary, fixed the back fence, bought a bed frame I assembled badly and kept anyway. On the 2nd anniversary of my divorce, I hosted dinner for Tessa and 2 friends who had shown up without asking for details when my life was still burning. We ate at a long table under warm lights. No speeches, no performances, just food, laughter, and people who knew my name because I gave it to them, not because they forged it. After everyone left, I washed dishes and looked at my reflection in the dark kitchen window. For years, I thought justice would feel like watching them lose. Sometimes it did, but mostly, justice felt like this. My keys in the bowl, my money in my account, my signature on my own papers, my mother's photo on the sill, my phone silent unless I wanted to answer it, a house with my real name on it, a life nobody else could mortgage, and the quiet knowledge that when they built a lie big enough to live in, they forgot something essential. Every house has a closing. Mine came with video. If there is a lesson in what happened, it is not that I became stronger after betrayal. I was already strong. That was why they leaned so much weight on me. The lesson is that strength without protection becomes a public utility for selfish people. Now I protect what I build. I ask for copies. I read every page. I trust slowly, not because love is impossible, but because real love does not require blindness as proof. Sometimes, before bed, I check the drawer where the archive is kept. Not because I need to revisit it, but because knowing the papers are there comforts me. They remind me that the truth survived being hidden, mocked, threatened, and dressed up for a baby shower. So did I.